Okay, great.
All yours, Barb.
Great. Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you, Jason. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this Public Safety Communications Task Force feedback session. My name is Barbara Neal. I'm Executive Director of the Enhanced 911 Board and co-chair of this task force, along with Commissioner Jen Morrison from the Department of Public Safety. We've got somebody that needs to mute, please. Jason, can you mute people? I think we're good.
Yep.
Okay. Sorry about that. So Barb Neal, co-chair along with Commissioner Jen Morrison. Also with us today from the task force is Ron Kumetz. I saw that he just joined. Ron is the representative for the Vermont State Firefighters Association. He's chief of the Alberg Fire Department. You can back up a little bit, Jason. I'm just kind of notifying folks on who's here from the task force. Great. So we appreciate everyone taking the time to be here tonight. We are looking forward to hearing your feedback and input on this draft system planning report. On the next slide, you'll see a quick agenda for this evening. We'll go through a bit of housekeeping and introductions. We'll talk about why we're here, sort of a very brief recap of the task force creation and the work we've been up to. Then a project schedule update, and then we'll be right on to the very important, most important part of this, which is the stakeholder feedback discussion questions, and then next steps at the end. So you can move us ahead one slide, Jason. Oops. Quick housekeeping, the meeting is being recorded in case you didn't notice that message in the beginning. It is helpful when you're asking questions or providing comments that you state your name and organization. And I just want to stress that this meeting is focused on gathering feedback from public safety practitioners. So our first responder community, our emergency communicators, and government officials, specifically regarding the content of the system design working draft. All right, and on to the next. Excellent. As a refresher, the Public Safety Communications Task Force was created in 2023 by Act 78 that year, and the task force was tasked with the planning and implementation of a reliable, secure, and interoperable statewide public safety communication system. That system is to be equitably and sustainably financed. It is to be universally accessible to all people in the state. And it's meant to enhance, strengthen, and build upon previous efforts and initiatives. So to that end, that was the charge in Act 78. And to that end, we've been meeting on a regular basis since late June of 2023. We hired 2 consulting teams who I'll introduce in just a minute in early 2024. And with their help, the task force has completed a number of stakeholder outreach initiatives, created or developed the inventory and assessment document, and then finally completed this draft system planning document that's out for your review. 2 important things I want to remind you of before we get started. One is just how much we do appreciate and value all of your input and feedback. We look forward to hearing what you like and what you don't like about this system planning document, and what your priorities are really for the future of public safety communications in Vermont. And it's safe to say that the task force entered this work with no preconceived notion of what the final public safety communications landscape would look like in Vermont. We've been presented with a number of recommendations and options in the system planning report, but we are still in this with an open mind, and your input is really going to drive the decision making that is to follow. So we appreciate all of that. Up on the screen, you see the task force membership. I've introduced myself. Probably most of you know Commissioner Morrison from Department of Public Safety. Our vice chair is Paul White, who was the chair of the Regional Dispatch Working Group, which tackled some of these same issues a few years ago. Paul is also the former chair of the Barrytown Select Board. Um, our public safety answering point representative or public safety answering point overseen by a municipal police department is represented by Jim Mack, who's the PSAP administrator in Shelburne. The Vermont League of Cities and Towns appointed Mayor Mike Dunges from Rutland City as the municipal official to the board, to the task force. I've already introduced Ron Kumitz, who's on the call with us tonight. And then our EMS representative is Michael Wright, who is the CEO of Calex Ambulance in the Northeast Kingdom here. He was appointed by the Vermont Ambulance Association. So I mentioned that we hired 2 project vendors. Joining us today are the task force project management team. That is Rick Burke and Dom Arcuri from Televate. Televate serves as the project management team for the task force and acts as our trusted advisor throughout this project. We also have several members of the Mission Critical team. Mission Critical Partners is our system planning consultant. And their subject matter experts developed the report we're going to be discussing tonight. And their expertise and depth of knowledge in all of these subjects is clearly reflected in that document. So I thank everybody from Televate and Mission Critical for being here tonight. I thank everybody else on the call as well. And I'm going to hand this over now to Dom Arcuri from Televate to take us through a project planning update. Over to you, Dom.
Thanks, Barb. And I would like to welcome everyone as well this evening. As Barb indicated, the task force has been in place, created by Act 78 since 2023. And this team you see here tonight of the task force, together with Televate and Mission Critical Partners, has been working over a year to put together this draft report that you hopefully have reviewed and will provide us comment on. We did a very extensive planning and inventory collection process right up front. All 37 dispatch centers throughout the state of Vermont, as well as including some of those in neighboring states that dispatch agencies within Vermont, were visited and were interviewed and provided input via an extensive survey. Some of you may have participated in that survey, and we thank you for that. Following that, we did a thorough assessment of the existing systems in Vermont, all systems associated with dispatch. That included the actual, dispatch equipment, LMR equipment, communications equipment that would be used to communicate from dispatch centers to first responders, the technologies in use there, including any dispatch technologies, CAD associated items, we, as some of you may participate also in the town halls, we had regional town halls last year where we got input on specific items, as well as listening sessions with the general public, all providing feedback into the existing system, how it's operating, what is successful about it, and what opportunities there were for improvement. We took all of that information and worked to put together this draft system plan that you have for review, and that's where we are now. We are nearing the end of this portion of the project. If you read the cover letter to the plan, we're accepting comments via via either email or the task force website, or or verbally as we go through our meeting today, through the end of the month, March 28th, at which point we will be compiling those comments, addressing those as best as possible, and then providing an updated report.
Okay,
I
and
guess I'll
I think we're
hand it over to
going.
you, Bonnie.
Yep, I'm good. Good
Thank
afternoon,
you.
everybody. I'm gonna apologize up front. I am mobile, and so I may have to end up turning this over to Jason, but hopefully we won't. So the of the conversation today, we've already had one of these yesterday, and what we're really looking for again of that stakeholder feedback on the all the sections of the report. What we do ask is that we want everybody to be present, candid, respectful, listen as partners, because it is a very big state. And so what may not, feel right to you as far as where you are in your local municipality, we need to look at this as, from a statewide perspective. And, we really welcome the feedback, the criticism, but at the same time too, if you have some solutions and some suggestions on how we can maybe fill a gap in the report that you find. And so, we ask for that candid, but, if there's some thoughts that you have to fill that. And then if there are those moments where we do kind of start going down a rabbit hole, Jason is monitoring chat. He is also monitoring our parking lot, or keeping track of our parking lot, where we will put those conversations and ideas. And if we have to come back to them, or we'll be able to hand those conversations off to the appropriate folks. All right, Jason, next slide. I think I have a little bit of lag, so just if you can tell me when it's on the other slide for the group. Okay, great. Okay, so what we'd like to start off with in a very general high level, this is the interactive part of this conversation. So whether it be in chat or you can come off mute, raise your hand. When you first looked at the report, when you first saw the system design plan, would anybody please share what was your first impression of the entire document? Anybody have anything? Jason Norton, Cassie Lunderville, Martha, Mike Donahue, anybody have anything to share your first impressions of the document? Ah, Cassie, I see you're saying overwhelming and kind of scary. I can totally relate to that. These documents can be very complicated, a lot of moving parts. Um, One thing I would like to share is that if you look at it as an entirety, what we were trying to do, and I think Don may have mentioned this, providing a variety of options so that some things may be easier up front to kind of get the balls rolling, but ultimately the decisions will rest with, with the state on, how to ultimately proceed. So, but try not to look at everything as an absolute, as if that's the exact recommendation. We provided a variety of options to be able to find the right pathway for the state of Vermont. Anybody else? See a lot of names on here. We need feedback, folks. All right, well, we're gonna dig in deeper into every single section. We're starting off in a very broad. Oh, who just came off? Chris? Chris, you just came off on camera. Did you have something?
Yeah, I'm having some technical difficulties, but just to give a little, input, and I think it kind of goes along with the comment that was just shared. I think it is, of course, a bit overwhelming when you see the document, as a first impression, because obviously it's a big problem to tackle. It's a large issue to tackle, and I didn't expect it necessarily to be an easy, but I think that, of course, was the first impression, that there's a lot here. Some of it seems like it's, there's many different options, but all the options seem like no matter which way you go, there's an awful lot involved, a lot of moving parts. And just from, an outside looking in perspective, it's like, how do you make this happen, in any semblance of time? I guess that was my initial thoughts, as far as the governance options and all of that. It just seems like there's an awful lot to tackle. And again, I'm not surprised by any means, but yeah, it was just a lot. And I'm still reading through it. Obviously, we just got so there's still a lot to go through here and a lot to respond to. But from my perspective, of course, I have concerns, and I'm sure others on the call may have concerns as well.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Chris. We see Ben has a comment. I thought 80% of the report had great ideas in regards to statewide radio network, better CAD system with integrations to other systems and dispatch centers, as well as statewide protocols and QA were great. Well, thank you for that, Ben. Again, hopefully somewhere in there's something that can folks can get behind. Some of the recommendations are a lot probably easier to achieve, and some of them are more complex. And then we have Chelsea. First immediate impression is first why, then how. Understanding its entirety as summarized by Al, as with such. So great, appreciate that. All right, there's going to be more opportunities, and I will warn you all up front. Jason, if you can go to the next slide, the very last slide. If you have not spoken up during the whole thing, we will be calling on each person individually. So hopefully just be prepared for that. Next slide, Jason.
Yep, it's up.
All right, thank you. All right. So on this next slide, again, it kind of looks at the document. I think we don't need to spend as much time on this one, because I think we'd already talked about kind of some of the things overarching. There were a few comments about what people like. Let's ask, so what do you not like about the document? Those are things usually that seem easier to answer. Anybody want to share what they did not like about the document?
Es una relación para esforzar
and we're going to reiterate, there's 15, 16 people on here. This is where we really need your feedback. We cannot afford for you to be quiet. No gaps, no likes, no dislikes. All right, let's see if we can get some traction going a little bit deeper into the document section by section. Jason, can you go to the breakdown?
Yep, go ahead.
Thank you. All right, so and sounds like some of you guys are still working through the document. Maybe you haven't read it completely. It is broken down into the sections that you see here. The executive summary, the methodology, system design, future opportunities and considerations. And then within that is really where the meat of everything is, with sections 3.1 through 3.7. We're going to break this down, now and have the same kind of, hopefully a discussion in each of these sections. So Jason, if you can go to the next slide. And when it comes up to the executive summary, as you can see to the right, we have the same questions. What do you like about the section? What did you not like? And what were the gaps? So specific to the executive summary.
And Bonnie,
What are the thoughts?
while we're waiting for people to jump into that, Cassie Lunderville did have 2 comments
Okay,
for likes and dislikes. She did not like the final recommendation for physical consolidation, but she did like the idea for consistent training across the state.
all right. Appreciate that, Kathy. Anybody have any comments about the, the executive summary? Is it effective? Does it contain what it needs to? Does it give you an overview of the report? Is there anything that's missing that could make it a stronger executive summary? Something that you thought you should see there?
Bonnie, this is Barb. I'll throw this in here since we're on executive summary. I did get some feedback directly. Looking for the executive summary to be a bit more concise and maybe put be clearer with what the significant or major points are of the report. So I don't have input on exactly how you would do that, but that was the feedback, looking for a little bit more concise executive summary.
Okay, appreciate that. And just an example with that feedback, if there were to be like what was actually missing, what points do you guys think needs to be in there that may not be in there? We have a new message. So Ben, see, the document itself was rather hard to read and comprehend, even with a vast emergency communications background, difficult to understand. And I'm afraid that those that don't have the knowledge of public safety and emergency communications won't understand what is trying to be accomplished. The physical consolidation part was shocking to say the least, especially since the current state dispatch centers have been looking to offload municipal agencies for the last several years. Ben, can you come off mute for a second and just share a little bit about that last sentence? Ben? Oh, okay, you don't have a microphone available. No worries, no worries. Okay. Maybe you could just expand on that in the chat for us at some point. Anybody have any other feedback on the executive summary? All right, Jason, let's just move on to the methodology for a second. The methodology itself, I think what we've already learned is that we may need to bring some more information over from the assessment, the inventory and assessment, which I know has not been published yet, which may help a little bit more here. I just wanted to, make sure we hit every section at least for a minute or two. Is there any feedback on the methodology itself? Does it help us all explain in some ways what we did and how we got where we got to? Very quiet group this evening. Well, then let's get over to the meat and potatoes part. Let's get to section 3. And Jason, you may need to be ready to put up the document like we did last night at some point. All
Okay.
right, so thank you. With regards to organic and inorganic approaches to regionalization, just a little bit of additional context when we were looking at this was organic and inorganic as far as these approaches, and inorganic, and that we're trying to get across, and you can let us know if this came across or not. That in an inorganic environment, it's when typically something happens at the state level and consolidation becomes mandated in legislation. An example of that is with the state of Illinois, where they have a mandate that if your county has less than 25,000 people in population, you can't have more than 2 PSEP in that county. Um, on the flip side of that, actually, then that similarly, that has happened in Minnesota, where there's been legislation that there's actually only one dispatch center, one PSAP in every county, and it is managed under the sheriff of those counties. And that's, you know, again, inorganic. Organic is places like Palm Beach County in South Florida, where they had once had 24 PSAPs, and again, the largest county in Florida. But now they've, over the years, they have now reduced that down to 13, but it's happened very organically through partnerships and conversation. So with regard to that, you know, did that come across in this section, or anything you liked about it, didn't like? Are there any other gaps we could fill in there as far as explanation of what we mean? And I'm gonna reiterate again, this is, these are, these are feedback sessions for a reason. We do need comments.
I think you have a couple in chat now, Bonnie. Can you see those?
Let me see what we got. I would say this is Cassie. I know that my agency, Southwestern New Hampshire Mutual Aid, was unable to submit much of the data that was requested because our current CAD capabilities do not allow us to break down call information by town. We dispatch for 78 towns in Vermont and New Hampshire, and I think that has skewed our data a lot. I certainly will when we get, okay, that's, okay, so she's gonna share that. And that's a good point, Kathy, which we tried to, you know, bring into the conversation here, and you'll see points throughout. We did do a voluntary reporting questionnaire, and that, yeah. And then once we gathered all that information, we did send those sections back out to each of the PSAPs and dispatch centers to help fill any gaps where we didn't have information. But you're right, we also tried to we did have to make some assumptions because of current capabilities, not just of CAD, but of a variety of record keeping and things like that. So in the assessor, the inventory, there are some assumptions that we have articulated how we had to get to something. And I think that's one of the things that we want to bring over into this from the methodology. But you're absolutely right. All right, let's move on to section 3.2, Jason.
Okay, and then just one other comment in the chat from Sharon. I'll paraphrase.
Yeah.
So the meat of her comment at the end, what I would like to understand is the difference between this document and vision and the challenges facing the task force with the DPS COPS grant challenges and vision in parallel for a new public safety system. And that may require, I'm guessing, potentially some offline feedback. So Sharon, we can certainly take your contact information from the session registration, and we can provide that to the task force so someone can follow up with you.
Great. All right, section 3.2. Now this is when we talk about regionalization, consolidation, we look at it from a 3-tiered perspective. Tier 3 being the broadest. This is where we talk about policies, operations, standardization of those, and you heard a lot about that in the early town halls and listening sessions about a desire for standardization statewide and what could we leverage to do that. And so this is a support perspective as well as operations and workforce. as well. And so that's what's covered under here. And like I said, it's the broadest. I don't want to say it's the easiest because it means coming into agreement sometimes of how things are done, but it can be standardization of support, standardization of quality assurance, and things like that that can be, have a pretty broad umbrella and can have a pretty good impact. Just nothing, could also have a really good impact on improving, how the system works, even in its current state. So thoughts about this section?
But Bonnie, Ben had a comment. I'm not sure if that
Yeah,
goes
I'm
back.
looking at Ben.
Okay, okay.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Not sure if that goes back potentially to the 3.1, the organic versus inorganic. But the state over the last 2 to 3 years has been wanting to offload municipal agencies they dispatch for. Within the last 3 years, there were funds, potentially $13 to $14 million that were going to be awarded on a grant basis for agencies to do dispatch upgrades with special attention to those that would be able to take on municipal agencies currently dispatched by the state. To his knowledge, the money was grants, but never actually awarded and paid out. And just last year, VSP was working with his agency on how to effectively move municipal agencies to their regional center and out from the state police umbrella. And he does not understand how there can be a 180-degree flip from that discussion last year.
Thank you for that, Ben.
I can speak to that a little bit. I think that probably input from the commissioner when she's available will be even more helpful. But with the original grant program, that was under the control of the Department of Public Safety and was moving along when the work shifted in the legislature and actually ultimately ended up creating this task force. So as I understand it from conversations with her, the direction changed, right, based on that legislative directive, really, to do this work. So those funds are still in the mix. There's an $11 million general fund appropriation that is still in the mix. There is not a specific grant program at this point, and we're not at the point to decide what exactly will happen with those funds in that regard. But that was part of the shift in thinking, was what came out of the legislature. I know there's a lot more to this conversation. So I think, like we did with the last question, it would be good to take this back and have some discussions with the commissioner and the rest of the task force to more fully answer your question, Ben.
All right. Thank you, Barb.
Yep.
Any other thoughts, questions about the policy and operations-based regionalization parts? Did we like what we saw? I mean, are we positive about standardization, opportunities to improve quality assurance? I think everybody's just saving themselves for probably tier one. Is this where mapping came in? So support for mapping and that type of thing can come in here. Mapping in itself would be in section 3.3, which we're going through next, Kathy, where we talk about all of the technologies that support dispatch. So no worries. All right, so let's go to section 3.1. And so I mentioned there's 3 tiers. So tier 3 is the broad. the next tier, tier 2, and that's where we talk about technology and shared system space. And we know, as you guys very do, it's very regional. Some agencies have different CAD than others. We have Valcor. Some places have different radio challenges and coverage than others, or different systems between, law enforcement and fire and EMS. But this is where we talk about, are there opportunities? I hear you, Martha. Opportunities here for a variety, again, of options. Everything from, um, you know, trying to work with what you have all the way through to, hey, do a procurement for something totally new, on whatever that might be. So, again, this is an options-based type of document to find what suits, the current environment that could be successful. And maybe it's not right now, but maybe it's a now of something in the future. So, any thoughts on the radio aspects in particular? That was a big part of this report. The concerns with coverage. We understand the challenges. If you look at the options for looking at things like CAD to CAD, is that something that Valcor can support, and also the other CAD systems, can they support it? Or, is it, to all the way again, go to maybe putting out an RFP to get a new CAD system, right? The options are there from a progressive kind of perspective. So what, and that's where we also, again, you can see we tried to provide the pros and the cons for each of those as well to help in the decision making. So, thoughts on 3.3. Anything in chat, Susan?
Nothing beyond Martha's comment yet.
Okay. Is everybody awake out there? All right, Cassie. Oh, okay. We do have a couple. Great. Thank you. I'm starting to get a complex, guys. Doug, how are you going to improve radio coverage in areas where it doesn't exist? So Scott, this is for you. If you take the New Hampshire Dispatch Center, Hanover, SWFMA, Brackentown out of this mix, how can that get coverage? We have invested hundreds of $1,000s in our infrastructure.
So, yeah, I'm just reading that. So, in the report, we presented about, in a nutshell, 3 options on how to improve coverage. The state and the folks at the Radio and Technology Services section there under DPS are already planning to build out simulcast regions in alignment with the current VSP zones. One of the options that we suggest is looking to build a statewide system piggybacking on that effort, essentially building out 10 simulcast zones across the state and adding infrastructure to get to the desired coverage level, which is generally 95%, but that's you can take a look at coverage of your population centers and main highways initially, but it's anyway, in a nutshell, that are the recommendations. There's also another recommendation to build potentially using the counties as the simulcast zones. You would have 14 zones. Now that is both in VHF and UHF, which is what's currently in use. The other option would be 800 megahertz, going statewide with 800 megahertz. But that would require a significant amount of infrastructure due to the terrain up there, and would by far be the most expensive one, but would also create the least amount of issues with channel acquisitions to improve those coverage levels. So it's whatever path goes down, it would take a lot of collaboration between all of the stakeholders to get much better LMR coverage across the state.
Great, thanks, Scott. We have another one here from Cassie. We don't use Valcor, but hearing all the issues with those and as a fire-based dispatch center, I think it would be helpful for the state to get an RFP. Thank you for that, Cassie. All right, let's go into section 3.4. If you could, Jason.
Good.
Just put myself on mute there for a second. So now we have the tier 1, and this is even more narrowly focused. And it's probably, of course, and I think as people have been saying the most, we talk about facilities based physical regionalization, what a lot of people refer to as consolidation. And so, as you can see, just to kind of give a little bit of context, we looked at a variety of things, everywhere from we're starting to, the idea of what we're trying to do though is to reduce the number of need for call transfers. Now, that can be taken care of with CAD to CAD with call transfers. But if that's not an option or that's not a route that the state wants to take, then you can also go into physical regionalization. And there are a lot of benefits to that too. And so it starts from, just where does it make sense to reduce the number of PSAPs, the fact that those that are not 24/7 perhaps. And then forming an organization that is actually just focused on the dispatch aspect of public safety. And so what can that look like? Now, the options that we suggested, if you went all the way to the 4th option, you could do regionalization based on the primary catchment area for the 911 calls, as it certainly lays out. The second option, we were trying to take into consideration how close people are to the other PSAPs. So we looked at it from a geographical perspective of closeness. Now, the other day it was suggested perhaps looking at it from a county perspective as an option. And then even another option is looking at it from a perspective, which isn't in here right now, it's just some of the feedback we've been getting. Is there a way to say, where would the dispatch center like to go? What is their option for a PSAP for their services? So I'm going to pause there, and I'm hoping that we're going to get a lot of feedback and conversation. So what are people's thoughts? Are there any other suggestions on how physical regionalization could take place? I know it's shocking. I'm not going to say it's not. I really empathize with that. Any thoughts?
I think we had a comment in chat earlier about someone was not happy with the did not like the final recommendation for physical consolidation. Is there a way maybe that person could expand on that? What their thoughts are, or thoughts on any of those options that were presented in the report would be helpful.
Okay, that was me. This is Cassie Lunderville calling. I'm from Southwestern New Hampshire Fire Mutual Aid. We're actually physically located in Keene, New Hampshire, but we dispatch for, I believe it's 33 agencies in Southern Vermont, fire and EMS dispatch only. I believe after reading, if I'm understanding it all correctly, looking at the 4 options for physical regionalization, option 1, we would stick around, but options 2, 3, and 4, we would go away. I'm not sure how our agencies would feel about that, but I feel like that's a gigantic um, disservice to those agencies. I think that if you were to talk to those agencies, they're getting really good service from us. And I mean, we have been around for 60 plus years and, or since not 60 plus years, but since like for a very long time. And we cater to our customers, to our agencies out in the field. And we are in the middle of working on a humongous radio system upgrade, both in New Hampshire and in Vermont. And I'm concerned for the same reason Ben mentioned earlier that that VSP and the PSAPs have been trying to get rid of agencies, not get rid of, but not dispatch for anyone but the state police, that kind of thing, just as much as a year or two ago. And now all of a sudden, these options are trying to put back all of this onto state police. And state police does an amazing job. They're amazing. However, they also have issues with staffing sometimes. And I'm just not sure how many people are going to travel. I mean, when they closed some of the PSAPs before, people didn't travel from their original PSAP to, for example, Westminster, like even when just Rockingham closed, some didn't even go to Westminster. So stuff like that, just I'm concerned that there's going to be major issues with the limited number of dispatchers we already have in the state of Vermont, which I own a house in Vermont. I lived in Vermont until just this last fall. I don't now. However, I'm still very vested in Vermont. So take that for what it's worth. I'm just very concerned about that option.
Yes. Well, thank you, Kathy, and I really appreciate you saying that. And it gives me an opportunity to kind of point out a couple of things. There is in that last four option as well that says, if a dispatch center decides not to, and again, if that's ultimately the decision, right? There's a variety of pathways here. If that's ultimately a decision for even some to do that, that the requirement would be for that standalone dispatch center to still maintain what any standards and requirements, maybe from the policy and operations perspective, that were decided on, that they would have to meet those requirements, right? And probably participate in something like a CAD to CAD or something like so. It's not like, oh, hey, there's no opportunity to waiver perhaps, but there would be those requirements. So we tried
I
to
do
build those
understand.
types of things in as well.
I'm wondering about funding. Would that just mean there would be zero funding for any of those standalone agencies then from the state of Vermont?
Don't believe, you don't receive any funding from them now, I believe, as
No,
well.
correct.
So
I
there
don't.
would be no change.
No,
Yeah.
agreed. I'm just curious, like if there were ever any grants or anything available, would there be a chance to petition the state for that kind of funding? Or would it be completely no, going strictly to the state system?
Sure. And then that's another great point. Where in fact, again, like it's like we talked about this or something, which we did not. I'm just saying, because we do have we still have a funding workshop to do. That's why the funding section of this probably is not because it isn't as built out yet as we want it to be, because we have to have that funding workshop. And I think that's a great point or question to bring up at that we'll be able to bring up at that.
And then Bonnie, just one clarification as well for Cassie. So the out-of-state dispatch centers would not go away, quote unquote. The options are simply pulling the Vermont dispatching back within the state. So for example, Southwest and Keene, that agency would still have the New Hampshire agencies that are
Understood.
dispatched. So there wouldn't be a move to close those agencies, just take the dispatching for the Vermont agencies and regionalize them back in the state.
Right. So essentially take away 45% of our budget.
Okay, so you're an agency that, the cities or the towns that you dispatch for pay a fee, correct?
Affirmative, yes.
Gotcha, okay. And that's something too that we know we need to follow up on and find out what all of those fee structures and cost sharing models are. That'll also help us a lot with the funding and recommendations. So thank you, Cassie. I really appreciate the participation. Let's see, where else are we here? Any other comments?
So Chelsea O'Brien in the chat, she thinks traveling is a huge issue with this, as well as staffing. Asking dispatchers to travel even further for work would be detrimental. And Cassie, as you may have just heard from Bonnie, we have a funding workshop to complete yet. So the rest of your comment about the funding for the municipalities and such, certainly take that under advisement with the funding workshop that has yet to occur, but will be occurring very shortly. And Bonnie, Doug Hackett has his hand up. Doug?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I'm speaking similar to Cassie. I'm from the Hanover, New Hampshire Dispatch Center, and I've been around for quite a while in this. And I was around when we had dispatching for Vermont police departments until the state of Vermont offered to bring them in under VSP and not charge them at all. And then they held around with me for 2 or 3 years, and then they finally caved into the fiscal pressures of paying me versus going back to Vermont State Police for no dollars at all. And then they moved back there and they're not being charged. I'm in the same boat as Cassie. I've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in radio coverage for my Vermont towns. I've purchased a modern CAD RMS program and have been working with Hartford, Vermont on a CAD to CAD transfer for a year now on getting that running. We're being, proactive and getting things done for our communities and customers. And now you're looking at the possibility of me being able to still exist, but I have, 5-year commitments in some contracts, and you're talking about, I can live without 40% of my revenue that comes from the Vermont towns, and we're very concerned over here as well.
Yeah. Yes, that does point out, and thank you for that. That does give an opportunity to point out too that these things aren't, again, nothing in here is absolute, right? It's a, again, think of it as a menu of options. If we're to want to go one way or this way, all different kinds of decisions. It's about making more informed decisions. And then to the timeline on this, the timeline itself, there may be things like, standardizing some things like when how call. This is one thing we heard about in the town hall, when calls are transferred, being warm transferred, in some cases not being warm transferred. But how that information is relayed and things like that, having standardization of those types of things. Those are some of the simple things that can be done. It can be, a year or two probably. But as you get into thinking about some of these more complex, like again, a statewide CAD to CAD, or again, any physical consolidation, especially if you're going from, trying to reduce by, 12 or 13 or however many, all the way over to the fourth option. That doesn't happen overnight. You're talking, 5-10 years down the road before an option would be complete in any way, probably closer to like 10 years, right? So these aren't things that aren't gonna happen overnight. They're gonna take planning and strategy, but we're trying to put forth information and options to legislatures that they can make informed decisions. Yes, Barb.
I just wanted to add, I wanted to
Barb,
thank Doug and Kat. Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes,
I
ma'am.
wanted to thank Doug and Cassie specifically for that feedback, and also the other people that are commenting in chat. It is critical that the task force understand your view of the benefits, the impacts, and the consequences of any and all of the recommendations that are presented in the report. So this feedback is very, very valuable, and I want you to know that it was heard.
Doug, we'll get to you in just a moment. We did have comments, Bonnie, from Ben in chat. He was actually affected by the dispatch center consolidation with the previous effort, he traveled to Williston every day from Rutland, was being paid a ridiculous amount of money to make that move, and it still wasn't worth it. He said he feels it's being drastically overlooked, where the necessary dispatchers will come from to bolster the dispatch numbers that would be needed. And he feels that Doug makes a great point as well. Agencies are moving away from the state dispatch centers where they don't pay anything for services to agencies that they do have to pay for just to get a better level of service. So thank you for that, Ben. Doug, you had another comment?
Yeah, two things quickly. I don't want to take up too much time, but first off, I don't want to come across as a person who's not in favor of consolidation, because honestly, I am. If done well and done right, I think it's got solutions. I'm a little frustrated that it seems like the New Hampshire people are just being kicked. The New Hampshire people who have worked so hard to provide Vermont agencies with quality dispatch service for a number of years are being kicked to the curb and not even considered, even though we have infrastructure that we've invested in place to help them, just because our zip code isn't in the 05 area. And the last thing is most recently, Fairleigh, Vermont Police Department found themselves without a dispatch center when the Orange County Dispatch Center closed, and Vermont State Police told them, no, we won't take you back. You have to find another place to go. We worked hard between Hartford, St. Johnsbury, and Hanover to find a solution for them. Hanover had the best radio coverage, and they came over to me with visions of grandeur that we were going to be able to have connections into the state of Vermont, and we've hit one roadblock after the other, trying to provide service to a very small police department so they're not out on the road with nobody to talk to.
Thank you for that, Doug.
And yeah, thank you. And I just want to ask a follow-up to that if I can. And your comment about your New Hampshire, well, the out-of-state centers have put a lot of time and effort in taking really good care of the Vermont citizens. Do you have a suggestion that
I
you would
think
want
on
us to consider?
I think on the consolidation level, I mean, I've had 1, 2, 3 police departments that are in the state of Vermont who are dispatched by Vermont or a Vermont agency question coming over back to me. I think just because we're in New Hampshire doesn't mean we can't provide the service geographically to the areas of Vermont that need the service. I think the number one thing needs to be improving the quality of the dispatching in the state of Vermont, and I've participated with several Vermont agencies in an attempt to form a Vermont Emergency Dispatch Association to try to help bring this all along. I just think that us being excluded is when we could fill a void there is not a good idea.
Okay. Really appreciate that feedback. That's, we will definitely, we've heard you and we'll take, like Barb said, this is the kind of feedback we need and I really appreciate that. I'm not sure your first name, Abar in the chat. Why is it necessary to make changes beyond simply standardizing the existing centers by making them better, including training, communication, and CAD? It's a very good question. Again, we're trying to give a variety of options from the simplest to the most complex that we feel would help do things like, in some ways eliminate call transfers, and help with staffing and a variety of different things. So hopefully when you dig into the report a little bit, you'll see a little, more of those justifications, but those first things are definitely strongly recommended as well. I saw somebody's hand up. I saw somebody else. Yes. Ron again, or was there somebody
Ron
else?
Kumitz.
Oh,
Yeah.
Ron Kumis. I'm sorry. Another
So-
architect.
So, I'm glad to see that we have people from dispatch facilities here. And I'm also glad that it's not politically incorrect to call out my brothers and sisters in the fire service for their lack of participation in this endeavor. there are 250 fire departments in the state of Vermont. And when through all these sessions, I guarantee you there will be no more than a handful of them, probably countable on a single hand, who will participate in our attempts at figuring out what to do. And so I urge those of you who are in dispatch facilities to reach out to the agencies that you dispatch and have them as stakeholders actually tell us what works for them, what doesn't work for them, and what their vision is. Because no matter what we do, we're pretty much doomed to doing whatever we can in as a good faith attempt as we can make, and they will all show up and say, that's not what we wanted. Well, we don't know what you want unless you tell us what you want. So if you would all please convey that to the agencies you dispatch, that would be a wonderful thing.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank
And
you,
we
Ron.
have Ryan Palmer also with hand up.
Yeah, Brian?
Hey, all, Ryan Palmer, Windsor County Sheriff. Kind of late to the meeting, and I wasn't able to necessarily review this as much as I should have. I thought there was more time before we start having some input. So I got a little bit on it, and maybe you can give me a slight bit of guidance here. But am I under the impression that we want to kind of consolidate to like 6 regional dispatch centers? Is that correct?
Sorry, say that last part again.
Oh, so the quick look I got.
No.
Y'all can hear me at all?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So my question was, we're talking about consolidating to like 6 PSAPs in Vermont. Is that how I understood it? Is the recommendation?
Well, that is one of the options when we talk about physical consolidation, depending on how far along or how much consolidation would want to take place. That is one of the options at the farther end of the right end of the spectrum. And then under there, we provide, at least right now, 2 methods for making that, options for making that happen, but it is an option. Our recommendation is to reduce the number of PSAPs. To what degree is what the options are laid out for and the pros and the cons for the decision makers to be able to make an informed decision.
Okay. Who would run those PSAPs?
The way we have it laid out right now at that end is as progressively, the one recommendation is to create a state entity that is not law enforcement, not fire, not EMS, but, but public safety communications, to have that role so that it's with the professionals that know, and not that others don't know the industry, but that is the professional aspect of it. And then at one point we thought about making all state, PSAPs, but not wanting to abandon existing facilities. And like, I think it was, can't remember the gentleman's name that was talking about, all the investment and up from, the Southwest area as well, was, they've made all these investments in technology and the facilities. Well, not so that people aren't abandoning these, where the existing PSAPs are could be fine and could host the existing, could host the growth of the consolidations, right? But again, it is a matter of what makes sense, and how many you want to reduce, how many you want to reduce them to. I think to try to summarize what I'm trying to say there is, to answer your question, that at the recommendation is to reduce the number of PSAPs. How many? That's what the options are laid out for. Who would run them? Our recommendation is that there would be a state entity that is focused on public safety communications as far as the dispatch part of it. So it's not under police, fire, or EMS. And then not to abandon as far as where they would be located would be to leverage their existing locations of the 6 that
Sure.
already exist. Does that
Yeah, I
help?
guess I just see as an elected sheriff, of course, like I have a lot of concerns about putting all our eggs in the state basket. The state of Vermont right now is struggling to staff really anything. And at times there's, as there is with anything, there's some territorial disputes or mission vision of how an agency head wants their dispatch run. It's just very concerning that we think that, the state who's in a dispatcher crisis or is maybe just coming out of that would be capable to actually staff and fulfill these. And then again, you have, you know, wonderful dispatch agencies like Hartford and Hanover, as Chief Hackett, expressed how much he's done for the state of Vermont. It's just concerning that, like, are we going to just abandon all these people that have worked 30 years and for an agency, and we're going to say, oh, hey, go work for the state of Vermont now, start over, seniority. Like, it just, I appreciate the amount of money and effort that was put into this. But when you talk about actual, like, boots on the ground, I don't know that this makes any sense for the state of Vermont. And it really is concerning. Like, what are we going to do with all these people, and where are we going to find people? Again, you take Hanover and Hartford; those are places that I work very closely with, that are I would put them up against any dispatch center in the region. What are we going to do with that talent? We're going to just say all of a sudden that you need to go work for some state entity that has there's some concerns about culture within, state dispatching right now. And that's going to get better because we just create a new, a new name, and that's still going to be under public safety. Like, I just, it's very concerning. And also, where's the buy-in? You know, you can't make me dispatch through you without changing statute. And, I have some aspirations. Maybe we'll stand up our own dispatch center. So it seems unrealistic. It seems like, frankly, it was probably a big waste of money. And it's concerning that this is the road that we want to head down when the system that we've put in place with consolidating state police dispatch centers has been, I think from an end user standpoint, has been a disaster, frankly. So anyways, that's my 2 cents for whatever that is. But anyways,
Sheriff, very much appreciate that. A section that probably diving into the governance aspect as well could be important. I think I heard a little bit of, that's what you're talking about in there. Any suggestions on how you would, modify the document? And regarding this piece in particular, again, none of this is absolute. These are, just showing different pathways.
yeah, so I can't speak really intelligently about it because, frankly, I'm away at training. I'm trying to manage my agency. I haven't had
Okay.
time to really sift through it, but I think that we have some very well-established dispatch centers that I don't know that consolidating under one umbrella under state control. I think as Chief Hackett, or I guess in this role, head dispatcher Hackett, spoke about, I think, professionalizing and modernizing our dispatch training, how we treat our dispatchers, how we view them, right? And then supporting our smaller dispatch centers with equipment. I'm fighting with the state. I've got a $1.25 million radio grant, and I'm trying to get on a tower, and it's been a horrific ordeal. I'm ready to spend money and share services with the state. We'll put a combiner up. We're doing all these things, but the state's incredibly difficult to deal with. And frankly, like, I won't be signing off on, like, you can put this in place, but unless it's free, or you make me by statute do it. And even then, I think that we might not be doing that. So
Yeah.
it's just it's concerning, but I think we need to use, we've got some really fantastic dispatch centers. And the geographic separation as well. You see in, like, big cities, right? You have 12, 15, 20 dispatchers. You have 911 call takers. Then you have dispatcher. Like, we just don't have the infrastructure, and logistically, it doesn't make sense in this area, right? I think we need to build solid dispatch centers, but putting it under one umbrella of the state, who's not fluid, is not flexible, and can't respond. You know, if I could, I've had plenty of conversations with Chief Hackett. I would work with them, but there's been some real roadblocks put up by the state, not really allowing that to happen. Again, Hartford CAD system, you know, they're pretty set on their CAD system. So you're going to make them change the CAD RMS system. Who's paying for that? And it just, I think there's a lot of missing pieces here. And I think what we should do is dump money into the really good dispatch centers that we have in the state and make them better. And not, you know, a state-run thing is not anything that I'm in favor of.
Appreciate that. And so just to kind of summarize, I think what we're hearing a lot when it comes to this section on 3.4 is that there is a lot of favor around policy and operations and technology and shared systems to be able to accomplish some of the priority or the higher types of things, like, you know, reducing call transfer or eliminating call transfer times and things like that that can improve response times. A lot of those things can be accomplished as well through policy and operations based and technology and shared services. So I think that's what I'm hearing is that those first two sections, 3.2 and 3.3, there's a lot more favorable information in there and suggestions than anything in 3.4 right now. Cassie, did I see your hand up?
I did have it up. I just had a quick question, actually. On page 93, under regionalization recommendations, you kept saying those were options, obviously, for the different choices for regionalization. But then it does say right on page 93, the recommended end state is for option 4, which is the 6 PSAPs with no regional dispatch centers. So is that the one, I'm guessing, that the report itself is saying the state should go with? So that if the state is now looking at that, they're saying, okay, this is what the report suggested.
The state's not looking at any of it right yet, right? Because
No,
it is still as a draft.
Would be.
Yeah. That's a good point. Thank you for pointing that out. I think we probably need to take back a look at that again as it is a draft. So I'm glad actually you pointed that out. So thank you. I think we have to relook at that wording. I thought I saw somebody else's hand up. How about, oh, Ryan, there you are, Ryan.
Sorry, I'm a politician, so you should never give me the floor because I like to hear myself talk.
I have a mute button.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, so here's the question. So if we were to go to the 6 state-run PSAPs, let's just in theory, right? What's my cost? Do I have to pay for that or is it free?
That is something that we're going to be talking about at the funding workshop, which we have not had yet. And that's exactly, so one of the charges in Act 78 on one of the earlier slides was that it needs to be equitable, right? And something that is accessible by the state. So there has to be state by everybody in the state. So there's this equitability factor that we have to look at. And we know that there are different cost sharing models, and we know some agencies are paying and others are not. And so that is something that we seriously have to look at. And from a funding perspective, even with that model, like you said, hypothetically, are there cost savings and other things that can be achieved along the way that would be able to contribute to that? And are there funding sources that could make it to where it wouldn't cost them anything? That's what we still have to explore.
Yeah, I guess to me, that's like, I appreciate again the work that's been put into this, but isn't that like maybe the most important thing we should have looked at? Like, what's this going to cost, and how are we going to fund it? I mean, that's a really big piece. And then what do you do with the towns? Like, again, Hartford, a big part of their budget is all their what they generate from revenue from dispatch centers. So that puts a big burden on them if you take that all away.
Yeah. Yeah, we had to kind of lay stuff out there and get a sense of what people can buy into, you know, as the sheriff was saying. To kind of lay out all the options, find out, what people like, you know, what can be bought into, what the state has an interest in, and then we can start whittling down an actual path that we could put some cost to. I mean, we have worked out some of the personnel costs, but we didn't have budget information from everybody. And so we had to make some assumptions and things there. And we have to follow up and get the cost sharing model and information. So I appreciate the questions and the information, and we're definitely going to dig into that some more. I do want to continue moving on here because we are getting down to the last minutes here, and I said that we were going to have to go around the horn here. So the governance section, any comments on that? And Martha, I don't want to disregard or your comment. I see that about how you feel about this. It's about reinventing the wheel. So thank you. And yeah, that's not. I don't think we're saying that any centers are broken. I'm just trying to find ways to make them better. But I appreciate that comment for sure. Governance 3.5. Any comments there? You know, here we're trying to make sure that, you know, people have a voice, that those concerned of how things are operating, how they're getting services, what would those service level agreements be? What would those, metrics, performance metrics be? Ryan?
Yeah, and I think if we talk about governance, I think that is maybe something that might even be impossible if you're going to a strictly like state run, as you said, maybe under DPS its own. I don't, and again, that might not have been the recommendation, but I don't think you're going to get buy-in from all these all these little kingdoms to give control 100% over to the state. I don't see that working, and it's a tough thing that we have in Vermont. But I think that's going to be a real tough sell.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Any other comments?
Could I jump in and make a clarification? So I think the purpose of the governance is to make sure that no matter who is responsible for the major PSAPs, that people do have that opportunity to have input. And that's the purpose of that governance structure, to sort of be that oversight. Sorry.
Hey, hopefully Jackie, I think we lost you there for a little bit. Any thoughts on governance? How about we move on to funding, Jason?
Go ahead.
All right, cool. So anything on the funding? We've obviously had some discussion on funding. We know that we are gonna have the funding workshop still. And, that's gonna be a big part. Looking at a variety of different sources and things like that. So there will be more context added to this. And then following up too with agencies to find out what their cost sharing models are, so we can incorporate that. And that could, and then of course we heard, packet about, the concerns about, the funding for out of state agencies that are providing services as well to the state. So we appreciate that. Next section, I believe, Jason, is 3.7, which is timeline, right?
Yes.
All right, so as we mentioned before, with timeline, this is, again, we're looking 1 to 10 years, so the timeline is extended. It's nothing that is going to be overnight. And over that time, again, having variety of options and information, even those will change because there will be cascading effects. So that timeline is intentionally long and it's going to have to be agile as well. Any thoughts on the timeline? All right, next section, Jason. I think it's just the appendices.
Correct.
Yeah, and those appendices, the variety of information, that the first appendices is the trends and insights. The second one, puts, what standards, best practices, and looks at each agency in relationship, to those. So that's, a good amount of information on how some of the decisions were made, in some sort of consolidation on that regionalization piece, more than the other, the sections that relates mostly to the section 3.4. Jason, what do we have next? We're getting very close on time. Actually, let's go. I think we've done a lot of that. Let's go to 14 if you could, so we can go around everybody's. I think that's what we're gonna get the most right now. So I'm gonna look at everybody on the list here, and I'm just gonna go. I don't know who is calling from 802. 802 last 49084. What suggestions do you have to improve this system design plan document? Who's calling from the last four, their phone number 9084? Or maybe we can come back to you. Uh, what are you, we're leaving the conversation. What are your suggestions to improve that?
Bonnie, you cut out there. Doug, what are your suggestions?
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing here is to look at what's currently available that's working that you can make better. Whether that's 6, 8, 10, 4 regional centers that provide service. Geographically, I think you're looking at large amounts of money that I don't know where you're going to come up with it to do this, especially when there's a bunch of infrastructure already in place that can handle it. That's all I got, guys.
Okay, thank you, sir. And as I go through the list here, in the interest of time, individuals that were on yesterday's call, for the moment, I'm going to go to others that this is their first call. And then if we have time, we can come back to see if you have additional comments. So next on the list, I have Laura. Apologize if I mispronounce Hayden or Hayden. Laura, are you able to?
Laura, can you please come off mute and share your comment?
And Laura, if you're speaking, you are still on mute. We'll go ahead and go to the next person. Oh, Laura does not have a mic. She's at work and can't give her thoughts right now. Appreciate that. The comment period is open through the 28th, so feel free to leave document comments there. Next on the list, I have Jason Norton.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
So I'm still thumbing through the document, as many others are. So as far as suggestions to really improve, it's difficult for me to really give a lot. I can tell you where my concerns are. Um, just from a work standpoint, I work in Killington, and um, it's a major problem with communications between us and dispatch centers. So I don't know if it's just solely an infrastructure issue or if it's something within the dispatch centers, but something that definitely should be looked at. And where I live currently, um, all the agencies that are out here on the fire and EMS side are dispatched by Washington County. And to switch these agencies to the state is going to be really difficult as we have absolutely zero communications with them whatsoever. the We have a perfect line of sight with Washington County's tower over here, and things seem to work really well. Not saying that state's not good either, but there's just obviously some issues that really need to be worked out on the infrastructure side for sure. Um, Funding wise and financially, I know at work we pay a fairly minimal amount, but the agencies here where I live pay right now, I believe it's $4,600 a year to Washington County for services. So if that's going to go up, these guys are going to have to find a way to fund a little bit more, just for service.
Thank you. Next on the list, Cassie.
I agree with Doug. I think that it just needs to be looked at more. We need to make sure we look at the regional dispatch centers we already have in the system and how things are going there. I obviously work at a large regional system, and I think that they work. There's a lot to be said for them. And I know that there's a lot of smaller agencies in the state now that are not like that, that could probably benefit from something similar. And I think maybe focusing on those areas might be better than trying to recreate the wheel in some of these bigger areas that already have something in place.
Thank you. Next on the list, apologize, the first name isn't listed, but M. Abear. No mic and you're dispatching. Okay, thank you. Let's see. Next on my list, Mike Donahue.
I'll pass. Thank you.
Okay. Ben Masterson. Okay, no further comments this time. Thank you. Let's see. Ryan Palmer.
Yeah, and again, I haven't been able to really dive in this as much as apparently I should have. But I think as far as improving this document, as somebody who's involved right now in a $1 million radio infrastructure upgrade, I think really understanding the terrain in Vermont, as the gentleman spoke, that they're using Washington County, New York, because they can't see the state towers and it works for them. I think you really have to do a deep dive in the technology and the infrastructure. To me, knowing the little bit what I do about what the actual cost would be, you're getting into the multi-million dollars to make this thing work from a technology and infrastructure upgrade, to the point where, like, I don't know where that comes from. And, my small agency, I'm trying to do something for $1.25 million, and then you multiply that around the state. I think that you're getting into the 50, 60, $100 million range, if not more. And I think that's very concerning. Also, you have to look at, you're talking about a decade from now. My problem is today, right? Like my problem is today that I have deputies out there that don't have radio or cell phone connection to dispatch in some of the areas that, so I'm pushing forward on a solution for today. We don't have a decade to wait for that. And so that's concerning. But then, you really need to address like the CAD RMS issue. Like that's a big deal, right? Like there are some agencies in the state that are on different CAD RMS systems and they're very vested into that. And then who's paying for them? If you were to consolidate, where is that coming? Like who's paying for them to do that? And frankly, you're never going to get Hartford or whoever to change their system. You're not going to force them to do that. So again, I think instead of just focusing on building robust systems that already exist and working on, instead of reinventing the wheels that terms been thrown out, we need to focus on the really fantastic dispatch centers. I'm all for regionalization. And I think doing away with some of the smaller centers and making the ones that are very efficient and work now, helping them out, throwing money into those is the way that we need to go. And again, it boils down to cost. You have this plan document, but it really doesn't mean anything, right? Like sheriffs in Vermont, we have to operate like a business. I'm also a select board member in Windsor, and we spend a fair amount of money to the town of Hartford who provides dispatch service for us, right? Cost is a huge thing. And to say that you didn't have numbers or you couldn't, like all this means nothing if it's not fiscally feasible. And I think like step one, if this really is for anything other than show, you have to have some real like thoughts on the cost here. And I know there's a whole other planning thing, but to me, again, I've been for almost 2 years now working on a radio infrastructure upgrade project. I don't know how this is feasible without, some serious federal money and not the 10 or $11 million that we have. I think you're 10 times the cost on that for whatever that's worth. But the funding, who's paying for the infrastructure, and then what are the fees? If it's a state-run program, why are we paying any fees? Like it should be a tax run. Anyways, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Christian Padati.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I'll keep it very brief. I said a couple of comments before, but I think, I probably echo what a lot of people in the room have to say, from a perspective of the plan in general. Yes, it's a very comprehensive plan. A lot of good information there, options for consideration. But I think we're all concerned, as to what this is or how this is going to impact our respective agencies. I mean, from a VSP perspective, and again, I am still looking at this plan as well, but from a VSP perspective, there's a large impact of this on our dispatch centers overall with, taking on, the majority of, potentially the majority of calls. So obviously I'm concerned about that. I think there are things in the plan that you could apply just about anywhere that makes sense. Certain standardization, training standardization, maybe P25 compliance, that sort of a thing. There were those things that you could put into place. That would be a good idea. And just about anywhere you go, if you can, within reason. But the idea of, again, improving infrastructure, like if you have to do build outs of current PSAPs and facilities, as was just mentioned by the sheriff, these costs could get ridiculous, and current monies would be spent at the snap of a finger. Staffing, of course, is going to be a concern. Again, just because a dispatch center closes down, it doesn't necessarily mean that those folks are going to move to any one of the 6 PSAPs just based on their, where they live. So that, and of course, when we're talking about the governance structure, not necessarily sure that some of the ideas that are outlined here would be necessary in changing the governance structure or creating a new governance structure. I think there's ways to get input from many different stakeholders, and these are not novel concepts necessarily, but creating more working groups or advisory committees, things like this can happen considering our current structure of 6 PSAPs. But to that point, yes, there probably are too many small dispatch centers in the state, and I think that can be looked at any time to try to decrease that number. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And of course, I'm saying that from a broad perspective. If you're one of those small centers, I'm sure you think that's a bad thing. So, so anyway, I'm kind of spitballing and just throwing a bunch of things out there. I just think just as kind of said on this call, overall, it's a very challenging plan, and I don't assume that anybody went into this thinking that this was going to be an easy, again, issue to solve. I think you've laid out the plan that could go up to 10 years to implement, maybe more. Anything in between 10 years, and I think that's probably right on. They're probably going to take, around that long to implement some of this stuff, if you are at all, if you're able to implement it at all. So thank you for the time, and I'll be on a couple of the other meetings, so I won't take up any further time.
Thank you. And then the last person, we appreciate everyone sticking with us beyond the 7:30 cutoff. Sharon Russo.
Since I am not a state of Vermont individual and that I am in the public safety arena, but probably differ than most people, I thought this was very well written from somebody looking in, right? I would say that, everyone who put their time and effort into this, all the consulting firms that were collaborative in this, I think it's a good idea to start somewhere when you're moving forward with a regionalized approach. And my God, I mean, in today's fiscally challenging times, we're not even sure that there's money coming in any other day of the week anymore. So I think, as a lot of people have said on this call, is that it's really trying to figure out the best way to utilize the resources you have, the ecosystems you have, train the individuals you have, and come up with a collaborative approach to move forward. But I think the document is very well written, and the executive summary really does pinpoint the issues at hand, from the cohesiveness of a new and future forward statewide LMR type of system, land mobile radio system, to the fact that there are still, even though we're trying to regionalize everything here in every state that we live in, there's still staffing shortages and inefficiencies, and people really need to be trained. So, I mean, I think that it really does hit on a lot of good things moving forward.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Jason, is there anybody else on the list?
Nobody that hasn't been in another session.
Okay. So, again, like Jason said, thank you guys for hanging around. Did anybody that was on another session have anything new that is revealed to them that they wanted to add? Want to make sure you have an opportunity.
DOE, of course, where I'm at, but yeah, we love
Okay.
DOE stuff.
So just really quick then, next step, we're going to complete the town halls into listening sessions. We've got one more town hall and 2 community listening sessions to do. We are going to hold the funding workshop. And then as you all submit your feedback, and as I said, you'll see on the next slide, where you can locate or you probably already know where you can locate the report. But you also have the feedback form that is on there. You can also email, thank you for your feedback. We're going to be collecting that, filing that, and then just discussing that with the team, and then address the areas that we need to address.
So long.
And then the March 28th. So the feedback will be open until March 28th. And with that, I am going to toss it back over to Barb. Please close this out.
Okay, great. Thank you, Bonnie. I had a little trouble hearing the last part of what you said, so I wanted to make sure everybody did hear that the comments are open through the online form at the task force webpage, which you can see the address on your screen, through March 28th. And we really appreciate all the input tonight, and the straightforward and honest feedback is very, very valuable. And we'll look forward to any comments you want to submit otherwise. And certainly feel free to join us at another town hall if you wish. And thanks again to everyone for being here tonight. We really do appreciate it. Have a great night.